Edgta Salata, who is a private attorney working with immigration and is fluent in Polish, and is also works with me on unauthorized practice of law cases. And we're going to talk about unauthorized practice of law cases and why it matters in dealing particularly with immigration and topics such as guardianships and powers of attorney. So I want to welcome you to come back on the show. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
And during the show, if you have questions, I want to invite people to call the number on your screen at 312-738-1060, 312-738-1060. Please call if you have questions, and Edgta and I will attempt to answer them. So before we begin talking about our program, I'm going to talk to you a little bit in English and then in Spanish about the Chicago Legal Clinic. The Chicago Legal Clinic was founded in 1982 as the South Chicago Clinic for Immigrants. But then the Pilsen office was opened, so it was the Chicago Legal Clinic for Immigrants. And as the work expanded to other populations and other groups, it became the Chicago Legal Clinic. And the two young lawyers who started the clinic, Thomas John Poprocki, Bishop of Springfield, and Ed Grossman, who just recently became Emeritus President of the Chicago Legal Clinic. The Chicago Legal Clinic is now headed by Adam Saltzman. And that is new, and we congratulate Adam and Ed on their positions. But the Chicago Legal Clinic was set up to help people in the south part of Chicago who had lost their jobs when the steel mills closed. And not only did this impact on the people who lost their jobs, but they couldn't go to local businesses, they couldn't go and have a bite to eat at a restaurant, they couldn't go to a theater, and so the local businesses suffered. So they started the Chicago Legal Clinic, which is a low-cost clinic that works with people who generally are working but do not earn very much money. And today, the Chicago Legal Clinic has offices not only in South Chicago and Pilsen, but also in Austin, downtown, and there are free advice clinics in the Daly Center that work with child support, foreclosure matters, name changes, and there's also a free clinic for students at Harold Washington College, where I also am a professor, a member of the faculty. So if you have a question, domestic violence, custody, Social Security disability, immigration, real estate, please call the number that is on the back of the screen from 9 to 5, Monday through Friday, 773-731-1762, 773-731-1762. So now I will try to say the same thing in Spanish. So, buenas tardes, me llamo Carolina Schoenberger y quiero decirle un poco de la Clínica Legal de Chicago. La Clínica Legal de Chicago fue establecida en 1982 por dos nuevos abogados que querían ayudar a la gente del sur de Chicago. Antes de 1980, había muchas acerías en el sur de Chicago, pero se cerraron a las acerías y la gente que trabajaba en las acerías han perdido sus trabajos. También los negocios en el sur de Chicago sufrieron por la falta de clientes. En este barrio no había ningún servicio legal a bajos costos por la gente que necesitaba ayuda legal. Entonces los dos abogados establecieron de la Clínica Legal de Chicago en un solo cuarto. Actualmente hay 4 oficinas de la clínica en el sur de Chicago, Pilsen, Austin y en el centro. También hay varias oficinas que ofrecen ayuda gratis en las cortes y también en Harold Washington College para los estudiantes, es por donde soy profesora. Si tiene un problema legal, llámanos por favor. Inmigración, violencia doméstica, si quería comprar una casa, testamentos. Entonces, llámanos entre 9 de la mañana hasta las 5, el lunes hasta el viernes. Llame, por favor, 773-731-1762. Yo quiero también decir, tenemos un nuevo director ejecutivo que se llama Adam Saltzman. Bienvenido, Adam. Bienvenido. Entonces, hablaremos en inglés, pero si tiene una pregunta en español, ha de llamar el número en la televisión 312-738-1060. So, por favor, llámanos si quería preguntarle algo esta noche o si tiene otros problemas, llámanos 773-731-1762. Entonces, ahora en inglés. So again, welcome and thank you very much for coming on the show. So we are both champions to try to tell people why they should work with lawyers on immigration cases. What is the unauthorized practice of law? Why does it matter? So if I can just ask you that.
So basically it's important to acknowledge that in order to provide a person with legal advice in the state of Illinois, the person providing that legal advice should be a licensed attorney. And even actions such as selecting immigration forms, for example, if we are seeking to legalize our status in the United States and we are not quite sure which route to take, even an advice on selecting the forms, which might appear to be very simple, there is a component to it which may really determine whether or not we are successful ultimately in achieving the goal, and it constitutes providing this person with legal advice, providing them with the legal advice of which route should they take in order to be able to legalize, for example, their status here in the United States.
And let's assume that someone goes to a non-lawyer who just chooses a form and gives it to them. What is the worst case scenario? What can happen?
The worst case scenario would be for this person then to sign this form without reading it. The form might contain a lot of information that's inaccurate. Then the form is filed, for example, with immigration, USCIS, and that may lead to an arrest by ICE, immigration police, in eventually, potentially even removal from the United States.
So the bottom line is that you get bad advice, you can get deported.
Correct.
Okay. So why is a lawyer different than someone who is a notary working in a real estate office?
So first of all, for an attorney needs to undergo 3 years of schooling in law school, then take the bar, and which presumably makes this person competent to provide a potential client with legal advice. And also, if, for example, an attorney makes a mistake, there are legal actions that client, for example, an immigrant seeking to legalize their status in the United States can take. So there are ways to keep attorneys accountable for the work where we may not have such easy routes when we deal with lay people.
So today I met a lady who in 2012 signed a form coming back into the United States. She thought it was a tax form, she didn't read it, and she was abandoning her residency. But she continued to call herself a resident, she had the card, and she continued to go back and forth, and only recently discovered that she abandoned her residency and now wants her daughter to apply for her. Is there a risk in doing that?
Well, definitely, and we can also see in this example the repercussions and implications of maybe acting on behalf of somebody's advice and how far in the future, how far-reaching those repercussions might be. And if in this particular case that you were referencing, we need to basically research the case. We need to take time and to compile all the materials that we need, and, for example, obtain a copy of the actual file from immigration to even be able to be in a position to determine what course of action we might have. And for example, if this person was represented by a competent attorney, presumably she would have access to copies of all the documents, and we wouldn't have to wait 6 months to obtain a copy, just to obtain a copy of the file.
Yeah, and I have to say that I don't know if I was successful in convincing her that she should file a Freedom of Information request and then bring the items to a lawyer to look at, but right now, we have a very scared population. I'm scared about what may happen regarding immigration, all the rhetoric that's coming out of Washington, all the hate. It's awful. And one of the big topics that we're talking about now is guardianship and powers of attorney. And do you have to be a lawyer to fill out a guardianship? Why
Well-
can't the notary in the real estate office do it?
Right, so, well, I would say that you don't really have to be a lawyer to fill it out, but you definitely should be an attorney if you want to advise someone on the documents or the repercussions of filling one out. And I think if it's important to remember that this is an illegal instrument and that one should educate themselves as to what type of guardianships are in Illinois and what type of guardianship would best fit their needs, and whether or not they actually need to appoint someone as a guardian, for example, for their children.
So in Illinois, if you go through the courts, you can have a guardian for an adult. Maybe an adult is disabled, an older person who cannot or should not be making decisions for themselves. It can be medical, it can be estate. You have to report, if you're the guardian, to the judge. Every year on what happened, you have to file a report. And if I'm not mistaken, though, the judges will not appoint someone who is undocumented as the guardian.
Correct, I believe in most of the.
So that's a problem if you have to find someone you can trust who is willing to take the legal responsibility and financial responsibility of taking care of your children or your mother or a disabled child. And it does cost money to go to the courts. On occasion, they have to appoint someone to look at that, look at the child and look to see if you're a good person. And I don't remember how much it costs, but I think it can cost several $100s. So the good news about a guardian is that there's someone in charge who's going to make sure no one is taken advantage of. And the bad news is that if you have no one who is documented, who is willing to take that responsibility, there's a problem. If I'm not mistaken, though, everyone has to recognize a court-ordered guardianship. However, many people are now handing out a short-term guardianship, even lawyers handing them out like water, and not everyone recognizes a short-term guardianship. So guardianship doesn't cost very much money, doesn't take a lot of time, but in doing a guardianship, you want to know, does the child have special needs? Because if the child has special needs and short-term guardian brings the child to the hospital may not recognize the guardianship. We have powers of attorney also.
Correct, and again, this is a legal instrument, and I'm sure that you came across in your practice across situations where executing such document then led to liability, correct? That was...
Well, power of attorney. Power of attorney, again, is something that you can do to appoint someone who basically will take care of the financial matters. But unlike a guardianship, there's no one in charge. It's like a blank check. So you need to know who you are giving permission to spend your money to. And the same thing about a healthcare power of attorney. Healthcare power, this person's going to make decisions about what kind of care you're going to get. So if you want to be kept alive and you need a special expensive operation, again, that person would be making the decision. Guardians, again, through the courts, it's certainly more difficult, but you have someone in charge and everyone has to recognize it. Powers of attorney, people recognize. Short-term guardianships would not. So if you were had a child and you were worried that you might be detained, what might you want to ask about a guardian?
Well, I think the most important part would be to make sure that you fully investigate any type of criminal history that that person might have. Is this person really fit to have all the powers that a parent can have over the child?
I think that's really important. And so where do you find out about a police report?
So, correct. So you basically, in my practice, if I was to investigate or if I want to talk to a potential client or a person that would like to take that power, I would actually ask, the potential candidate to research their criminal history. You can obtain access and review from the police department downtown in Chicago. You can also request that this person obtains copies of FBI prints, which would be another way of obtaining some type of record as far as the criminal history.
So you would want to find out about the criminal history. I would probably want to find out if there was any domestic violence, if there was anything that they had done with domestic violence. I don't know if people who are signing these documents understand that there's financial liability and criminal liability in taking care of someone else. And there is. So I guess the question comes down to, why do you think people are so hesitant to hire a lawyer?
I think many times people are under preconceived notion that hiring an attorney would immediately equal to a huge financial burden, that every attorney is going to be very expensive, and that they won't really know what they're getting themselves into financially, and it's just basically something they can't afford.
So people think it's going to cost too much. And yet, aren't there lawyers at every level?
Correct. And I think it's important to know that there are attorneys who are expensive, there are attorneys who aren't, and they're like with anything else, with any kind of services that you would like to obtain, there is a different price range. And as an educated consumer, it's important to basically research attorneys. I would recommend looking at American Immigration Lawyers Association's website and select a few potential candidates to give them a call and have a conversation regarding what type of fees are they charging. And I think that many people would be surprised that there is an attorney for every price bracket.
There are attorneys at every price bracket. Again, it's not just filling in a form. It's not just filling in the guardianship form. It's not just filling in the power of attorney form. It's not just filling in the form for someone to immigrate to the United States, because as you mentioned before, you have to ask a lot of questions. I wish it were as easy as people make it sound like it is. So when you're going to find an attorney, you mentioned the American Immigration Lawyers Association, and what is the best way to access the American Immigration Lawyers Association? They have a website, don't they?
You can find more information about this organization at AILA.org, and the website provides a search engine where one can research an attorney by the type of law that they practice within immigration law, the state, and the language that they would like to speak with this attorney. Yeah.
And then call them.
And I would give them a call, and also every single time, like with anything else, every good immigration attorney would provide information regarding the fees. And prior to engaging an attorney, I think everyone should know exactly what type of services are they going to perform and exactly how much is this going to cost them.
When I talk to clients, I also give them an evaluation of the case. If there are problems, I tell them. And yet I hear sometimes that some of these real estate people say, oh, don't worry, or tax people, some tax people are now doing this, don't worry about it. How do you respond if someone says, oh, yes, I know you had an immigration case, but that was 30 years ago. Don't worry about it.
It sounds like it's too good to be true. It probably is too good to be true. And I think sometimes, we are looking for some type of hope, and we are willing to go with maybe the least plausible option, but the one that gives us hope. But I think it's important to look at your case realistically, educate yourself, and to make sure that you're picking the choice that will not jeopardize your future in the United States.
Again, you lose a case, you don't lose money. You lose a case and you lose the possibility of staying in the United States. So I think that, again, money is a consideration, but probably should be the least consideration. I think in the Polish community there are people in travel agencies who do immigration work, if I'm not correct.
Correct. Travel agency, some accountants, it's very widespread. And I think it creates a lot of damage. And many times applicants don't realize that once something is submitted to the government, it's very difficult to undo it, and it might be much more costly to actually repair the damage that has been done by simply filling out and submitting application that, for example, states facts which are not true.
To my lovely lady who gave up her residency, I said to her, please, first of all, get a copy of your file and then bring it to a lawyer, because you're going to be paying far more money to correct the problem if they arrest you for fraud and try to deport you than to see what you can do ahead of time to prevent it. But as I mentioned, I don't think she listened to me. So it's hard to give people bad news. Don't you agree?
Definitely, and I think that's part of the problem, that many times applicants would pick an option that sounds better just because there's hope there. But I think that we should be willing to educate ourselves and listen to the realistic reevaluation of the case.
So in wrapping up, because we're going to bring time, it is crucial to consult with an immigration lawyer at every price point. And as far as guardianships, again, it's a conversation you have to have with a lawyer who will go over what is the best option for you. And powers of attorney may sound great, but you're giving someone a blank check. So AILA is certainly a great resource. The Chicago Bar Association is a good resource. It is helpful to talk, as you mentioned, to talk to the lawyer and see if you like the lawyer. Do you trust them? Not only because they tell you what you want to hear, but because you trust that they're looking out for you. What last words would you want to offer as advice in dealing with this very difficult time where people are afraid about their kids?
I would definitely say not to panic, and make sure to educate yourself on options available, educate yourself on things that you may do in order to protect yourself.
That is great. Well, again, Edgta, thank you very much for coming on the show. I want to thank you for watching. We will be back in the month of June, the third Wednesday, for another immigration issues program, and we hope that you will watch. And please let us know if there are any questions. Thank you.